Welcome to episode 168 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we continue our Chrono Trigger series with part 2. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have 3 friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him. His name is Travis Colnut.
Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
My second friend, Katie Lesperance. Hello.
Hello. Part 2, baby.
Part 2, baby. And joining us for the first time in the Chrono Trigger series is Ms. Flora Marigold. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. This feels like I'm invading on a conversation that, I haven't really been a part of, but I'm ready to just gush and join Katie's side, unless y'all have had a turnaround since episode 1.
You threw your hand up digitally in our Discord and said, hello, this is my favorite game of all time. Please let me talk about it. One of my favorites of all time. Please let me talk about it.
It was my favorite JRPG until Persona 5 Royal, and even then it's really up there. I have a lot of feelings about this game, so hopefully those will come out today.
Well, I'm going to ask you about your feelings in a minute, but if you're listening to this before listening to part 1, what I would do is go back to episode 167 and listen to part 1 first. It's Travis, Katie, and I talking about some of the really important pieces of the game, the setting, the overworld, the characters, etc. Today we're going to talk about stuff like the art, the music, the mid-game, the end-game, so please listen to that episode first. And if you like what you hear in this show, give me 3 things. Give me a review, 5 stars on your podcasting platform of choice. Give me a follow on Twitter at Left Behind Club, and give me a virtual high five in the Discord. You can find us at leftbehindgame.club/Discord for that. Let's just get right into it, starting with Flora. Flora, what I'd love to know from you before we talk more about the mid-game, the end-game, the music, the art, is your history with this game. I know you gave us a brief one, but I'd love to know more broadly about what you have done with respect to this game, and then maybe how you played it this time around.
Sure.
Or how you played it the last time you played it.
That's probably a better answer, honestly. I played Chrono Trigger for the first time when I was first getting into Twitch streaming in 2018. And so I played it in the fall of that year, and I don't know how or why it arrived on my plate, but it was sort of just a broadly discussed game that you just hear about. Like, Chrono Trigger is sort of framed as a classic, and I wasn't sure why or how. And I know that y'all talked a little bit about I think it's Akira Toriyama is the artist behind like the Dragonball and the Dragon Quest and this game sort of like styles. I'm not somebody who grew up with that. Like, I didn't have cable television because I grew up poor and couldn't have Cartoon Network and such. And so a lot of that was very vicarious for me. Like, my friends would be into that sort of stuff. And so this game didn't immediately evoke the nostalgia that you would think or anything like that. But I have always been a lifelong JRPG fan. I think one of the first gaming memories I have is Pokemon, which to me counts. And so I've always had that soft spot. And so when I was first getting into Twitch streaming and also writing more critically about narrative-based games, Chrono Trigger came up and I played it and absolutely adored it. The biggest things for me are what you just alluded to, Jacob, which are art and music. Those are the things. But also what I was originally intending to do my master's dissertation on was about temporal rhetoric, which is how we persuade each other through the way that we talk about time. And so
Ooh.
Go figure, a game about time travel would play into something that I think is really, really cool. And I'm a huge Doctor Who fan and other stuff. So this game taps a lot of those things that I'm already predisposed to like. And so I think that that's partially why I was so receptive to this game. I already like JRPGs. I'm also a musician, so one of the first things I did is, weirdly, I don't even like playing bass that much, but the bass lines in this game, I taught myself 5 or 6 bass lines from this OST because it's so good. And there's just so much more I could say, but I'm gushing, so I'll wrap up my thoughts preliminarily there.
Okay, well, I mean, you talked at length about the music,
Yeah.
So I'd
At
love
length.
to just short length, at short length,
It's hard
about
not
the
to.
music.
Yeah.
Mitsuda put this one together, from my understanding. It's heavily remixed. People love the music. I guess, some of us have played it a little while ago, but I'd love to know from what you remember if there's stuff that like immediately comes to mind when you think about Chrono Trigger. Because for me, there's absolutely one, and it is the theme of you like going back in time, like getting in your ship, going back in time, like that stinger or that music always sent me every time I went back in time.
I'm really bad with designating and separating out music in video games unless there's something that has like a unique vocal track or something that makes it like almost physically stand out from the rest of the music. It's hard for me to point and say confidently, oh yes, this musical moment is what worked for me. Now, that caveat being said, I can think of a few things. In your previous episode, part 1 of this Chrono Trigger discussion, the instantaneous nature of battle was discussed, and I would say that one of the most iconic things for me in Chrono Trigger music is just like the sudden you're running around and then like the bass just kicks in and you're all of a sudden in battle, and then like the absolutely unhinged like almost like xylophone solo thing that goes on. I don't know what it really is trying to go for. But like that's an immediate, like, I think of Chrono Trigger. There's also some amazing orchestral renditions of this music. I don't know if any of y'all have spent time on YouTube listening to it.
No.
But if listeners are curious and you like Chrono Trigger's music, many of the people who composed it, and I believe many of the people who worked on the soundtrack, have done full, like, 100-person orchestra level, like, recordings and stage performances of some of this music. And there's some like I think most of the stuff that really sticks out is like the cutscene related music. Not that those are my favorite tracks, but those are in many cases the most iconically used as far as how they represent the game. When I watch the orchestral performance, I cry like 100%. Like this music is that personal to me, despite this game being something that I played once. And I don't know. There's a lot of late game stuff that's probably good, but I couldn't tell you what they're called. Like a lot of like Lavos related stuff, and a lot of like end of time stuff, and the music. No complaints about the music. Let me just say that the music, and this is one of my favorite gaming soundtracks. Period. So I don't think gushing about it more is going to be helpful.
Travis, you're normally a music guy.
That's the thing. I am most of the time. I obsess over musical tracks in a video game. I think a lot of the time it is a nostalgia thing for me when it comes to hearing remixes or orchestras playing them, because I've played this so fresh. Like, I know there's tracks that I enjoy. I think I need to give it time before I think one of them hits me. Like, maybe if I were to listen to something next year and I'd be like, oh, that hits a beat that I forgot about, or that like, oh, I remember this portion of it. I will agree that once you jump into the time travel machine, that kind of that riff of whatever that is very good. Honestly, like, I'm trying to like think about it in my head, and it gives me Donkey Kong, Funky Kong, like dun 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 dun, dun, like Donkey Kong Country, like you're jumping into the barrel and fast traveling. It gives me that kind of vibe, and I kind of dig it. But even like we were not at this point in the story we were talking about, but when you go to, what is it, 12,000 BC or something like that.
I love this game.
Whatever it is.
That's just a casual point of reference.
Yeah. When you're in the floating islands, that music is so distinct from anything else I can feel like I've listened to in the rest of this game. I mentioned in the first one, the soundtrack and the music when you go to the far future is so different than what you would expect. This is also the same kind of vibe that like each little area, and I would say like 1,600, they're close to the same vibe, but you get this floating island music that's so different than what you were experiencing before. And it sets the tone for that world that that timeline that you're in right now. And I don't know, there's something about the music and how they distinguish each era so well using the music. Even the prehistoric one, which was probably like my least favorite of the music because it's just a little too like harsh and rough. Yeah, a little too much bongo-iness. It's and like even the I think there's like a main like later in the game you have to go through a whole palace area, and I'm like, I think I reached a point with it. I was like, I need to turn this down because it's just blaring in my face. It's a little too harsh or repetitive, but it still is like a distinct flavor for each era, and the game does a really good job of distinguishing its eras. That it attributes itself to the world that it's creating and makes those eras so distinct. And it's impressive when you consider that this is like a Super Nintendo game, and they can do all that with such such a little tiny cartridge. You can make such a change depending on the era based on just the music alone.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say something about the different worlds and the different musics and the tones that are set, but I'm like, Travis just did it way better, so that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll echo that. Okay, me personally, video game music, I will appreciate when it's really, really good. Like I notice when it's good, I appreciate it, but I've always been a person who really enjoys like vocals and lyrics in music, in my music appreciation. So like I've never been a big video game soundtrack person.
Interesting.
Some people just listen to them just on the daily, and it's just not for me. But like I said, like this game, the music is so good, it sets all the tones. The battle music is dead on. Like, and you do so many battles, and every time it kicks on, like I never got sick of it. Flora's
doing
air guitar.
Sorry, I was trying to quietly slap the bass, but
fantastic. Yeah, like I don't have that much to add, honestly. But yeah, it's very good. I know obviously it's appreciated as one of the greatest soundtracks, ever in video games, and I can understand why.
Yeah, I guess for me it's like even the small sound effects, like when a certain character dies, which we will talk about. I will not say spoilers. Even the small sound effects and things that went into the animated cutscenes, I appreciated, and the small remixes on battle themes. So like when you fight Magus, if you fight Magus, as one example, like that's a twist on boss theme that I appreciated. So it's even like the small twists that you would get in other JRPGs, but like it's just really well done here.
I love a boss theme
thoughtful.
twist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As a person who like Pokemon is my frame of reference for JRPGs, like that's something that I definitely drew out of this as well. Mm-hmm. Giovanni's theme, Magus's theme, does the same thing to the battle themes.
Yes. Actually, yes.
I have a question.
Please.
If you fight Magus, what is that about?
Do we rip into it now?
I don't know if we need to pull the Band-Aid off, but like who fights Magus? What are you talking about?
I know. I kind of want to know what happened.
I have a story. I will let everyone else go first, and then I have a story about this.
That I'm totally zigzagging this conversation further than it needs to go, but like I'm immediately curious on that plot point.
Okay, like so spoilers. Like if you're listening to part 2, like hey, expect spoilers.
Spoiler
but we're gonna fully spoil it now. There's 2 opportunities to fight Magus, correct?
Oh.
I remember only one distinct decision moment of like whether you let him join your party or not, but I don't remember 2 fights. It's also been 5 or 6 years, so
keep me honest here, but my understanding is that there's that exact moment that you're describing, Flora, where there's a moment where you have a choice to let Magus join your party or not join your party. Which we're bearing the lead about something very important that happens right before that.
She skipped all the way to the
plot points here. That,
we should contextualize this.
I will say, okay, because we're jumping around in time, things are happening. There's a lot.
It's just like the
different
game.
Characters, and these characters appear in different times, based on sometimes basically a wizard being like, I'm sending you to this time, and now all of a sudden this character from this other time is now in the past, and you didn't know that at the time, but now you know. This game in format and time, you know how I'm bad with directions. I've mentioned this before. I think on the Bloodborne pod I talked about how
I even know this.
My biggest challenge with FromSoft games is that I'm directionally challenged, and I don't remember where things are and how to get to where. I get so confused. No matter how much time I put into Chrono Trigger, I was like wait, but where? That person's from where, and who are they, and what's their name, and how do I get to this place, and how do I return over here? Like, I got so lost. And it took a lot more mental energy than I think it should have to try and figure out the plot and like the intricacies of all that. So yeah, that was how I approached that. Just completely lost.
It's worth throwing out there for me, at least, that I walked through this entire game without any sort of hesitancy or shame. There's no way I could have mentally kept track of the different like literal chronologies within this game and figuring out who is where and why and whatever without that sort of like lean on. For those who can actually do the mental labor of playing this game in their head, kudos. I am not one of them. I outsourced all of my playthrough to somebody else, and it still took me 35 hours, I should say. I have no idea what y'all's playtime completion was, but 35 hours with a walkthrough the entire time, unadulterated playthrough. So I imagine if you're playing this at like 7 years old in your living room and don't have a walkthrough or internet like back in the 90s, like this is intense.
Yeah. I used a walkthrough as like a guide to make sure I'm going in the right direction, so I'm not just aimlessly going from era to era talking to just God knows who. So I kind of used it as a guide to be like, okay, here's my next step. I will then figure it out once I'm in the space. But no, I want to say I played around, I think it was around 25 hours, but that was me so even with that, like just kind of giving me a guide, it still took me a decent amount of time just to get through there.
I was a similar amount of time. I think I was approaching around 30 or so. I have to say, I think this adds to like the replayability of this game.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
Where if I went back and replayed it, like you would draw so many more connections between characters and like their motivations, and you would understand it so much better. Like I still got out of it so much on the first playthrough, but it is a game where I'm like, oh, if I played this again, like top to bottom, like as I mentioned before, I've played the first 40% of this game like 8 times. I know that pretty well. But the rest of it, if I went back and replayed it, like I would get so much out of it that I understand why people have played it like multiple times.
I have a weird follow-up question for all of you, really. If memory serves, I think there's character-specific side quests for each of your playable party members, and I wonder how in-depth any of you all went into any of that stuff, and if that would actually factor into your overall playtime. If you want to speak to that, Jacob, go ahead, and then I can maybe circle around to the other thought.
This may be surprising to hear, because I'm typically a person who like just does the MVP where I just go through and finish. I did every side quest.
Wow, really?
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
MVP is like minimally viable product. Sorry,
Wow.
BJ, the businessman.
Lame. I resent you for bringing business into our chat.
Thank you.
About
Thank you.
art.
But I played 24 and a half hours. But I will not lie. The thing I appreciated playing this as like an adult man is that I know 13, 16-year-old me would have bounced off this really quickly just because I don't have patience for things that like really require you to think and read and reread and maybe use a walkthrough. I have no shame in saying that I had strategywiki.org open for this entire frickin' playthrough, but I mostly used it to read ahead a little bit and then go, when I got stuck and go, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I wouldn't have it open, but I just refer to it and then figure out in the world what I would have to do. And I would imagine that my playtime would be 35 hours if I did that. But it was only 24 and a half.
Yeah, I would touch the walkthrough when I needed to. More and more in the last third of the game to make sure that I didn't miss things that I really wanted to touch. But yeah, I didn't follow one directly, but I would refer to one pretty often.
I wonder if part of my playtime has to do with the fact that I actually streamed this game when I played it back in the day, because like when you're streaming a game, you like pause to talk to chat for a while, and like maybe that would have accumulated, I don't want to suggest 10 hours worth of chat, but like that's possible. So given that feels like a rather large disparity for y'all to sort of simultaneously say 25 and me say 35. Like I have to mentally account for like why that would be the case. And so immediately I was like, oh, side stuff, but apparently that's not an issue either. I just want to throw this out there as just someone who listened to part 1. It just occurred to me. I loved the whole like acknowledgement that the first 2 party characters you get are women, and like the whole like Travis girl power moment and everything.
Every single time.
Those who skipped part 1, what are you doing? Go back, listen to part 1. It put a smile on my face, and I was like, yeah, this game is like weirdly feminist for a 95 game. Like so.
I kind
Especially
of love
from
that.
Akira Toriyama, who like wrote Bulma. You know what I mean? Or like who drew Bulma.
I don't know what that means.
Bulma
She's the one in Dragon Ball with the boobs.
Great. I still don't know what that means. When I hear Jacob or I hear him talk about these things, or I see him tweet about these things, I'm like, oh, that's a Jacobism that I have no frame of reference for.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. I like it. I'm like, oh,
Are you saying I'm a snob?
No, I'm saying that I have no anime knowledge, and that you talk about anime, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, great.
I also
Flora
don't
nodded. That's all I needed.
No, I don't want to like rain on your parade, Jacob, but like if we're talking about like objectified women in anime, Dragon Ball Z is like one of the most tame examples I can think of, and I'm like, Bulma's like breasts are like fine as far as like no, we if we want to look at like Kill La Kill or something, again, one of my favorite animes ever, beware. So,
Is it like
that's all I'll say.
80% of her body? Is her boobs?
I'm not gonna. This is not a Kill La Kill podcast, but let's say it's simultaneously one of the most feminist and one of the most objectifying things I've ever watched. So, at your own peril, if you want.
Okay. Where do we take it from here? Flora, you said something about me talking about Magus's fight, and I actually had to go back and double check it because, like, am I wrong? Do you not fight Magus twice?
We didn't.
You fight Magus in the mid game,
Yes.
and then you have an opportunity to fight Magus later.
So,
but I think we're bearing the lead here that Crono dies. Crono literally freaking
that wasn't
dies.
spoken about on podcast number 1. All right, hi, protagonist is dead.
Wild.
It is wild.
It was wild.
Yeah.
I want to hear y'all's reactions.
I just blew mine. I don't know how you guys felt.
Just wild. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is interesting. I think I liked the idea that it was like, hey, let's take out the silent protagonist that is your like player character, and now you are simply going to be using the side characters, and like the team dynamic is different. And I think I liked the free reign to not have to use Crono the entire time. I was like, oh, can I have all 3 women in my party at once?
Yes,
I can. But like, it's more the idea that like, I don't know. I like the idea that the game plays with this because it does. I don't think I can think of a game that does this really. And like, yes, you can undo it, but you can also not undo it, and you can just finish the game and just not.
Yep.
You could just straight
There's
up go
different
for
endings,
Lavos.
right?
I guess, because you can
Yeah.
fight Lavos technically anytime. So I guess you
Anytime.
could do it
Yeah,
without Chrono.
yeah. You could just be like,
It's possible.
okay,
Yeah.
I guess
Oh, it
he's
feels
dead.
so incomplete, though. Just
It
like
would.
skipping all this
It does.
section of the main
Oh,
story.
for sure. But it's interesting that the game gives you that option. It's impressive that the game gives you that option. Like,
Yeah.
I would expect that kind of stuff from games nowadays. But to see a game then, I wouldn't have expected something like that. So that was the shocking thing that, oh, this game that is this old was doing this kind of thing first, or at least very, very early. And games that I know now could maybe be referencing ideas or stuff that they've pulled from that. So I may not have the nostalgia tied to it, but I have the appreciation that like, oh, this came first.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that was holding me back when we recorded our first episode, where I was like, this isn't landing for me the way I expected because the nostalgia isn't there for me. And so I'm feeling like, oh, I've seen all this before, but I guess I appreciate that this is maybe what did it first. But now I'm seeing that like, oh no, this is actually doing things that if you think about frame of reference and when this game came out, other games weren't doing this kind of thing where you're killing off the main protagonist right at like midway through the game, and now you've got to do a whole quest to possibly bring him back to life. Or you could just not, which is also super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the game could allow you to just leave the main character behind.
Yeah.
Like the character that is on the cover art, the cover of the game, and just be like, nah.
Yeah.
I don't need him. That's nuts.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked, I guess. Like I wasn't like mind blown. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I think that's because of playing it in modern day as opposed
Right.
to at the time. But I did think it was very interesting. Like you said, it gives you the ability to kind of like remix your party a little bit more. It kind of it freshens things up a bit right at like what, the 2/3 mark kind of just went about. You're like, okay, we're going to be going into the end game. You get a feel of what to expect, and to throw that big of a wrench in. It was surprising. And like you said, it was really innovative, and most games, any time in any year would be very, very hesitant to try anything like that. Mm-hmm. Not that it's at the beginning of the game and that it's, a permanent, but still, like it's creative. They're just taking the lid off of like a box of all these ideas of like, what if we did this? Like, let's try it and do it. And it's gutsy. I like it.
Well, it's also really unique in the sense of it is a game that encourages you to abandon something that you've been comfortable with for most of the game, which in most JRPGs is going to be your protagonist, who's often, by virtue of them being in your party the entire game, the most leveled up, the most experienced, and like that's your default character, right? Like Travis mentioned, like the all-girl party, and like that quite literally, that was one of those moments for me. This is like pre-transition, so I was still like in the throes of figuring shit out. But sorry for the language, my goodness. Figuring stuff out. If you want to go back and tidy that one up. I think that for me, like having like 3 different kinds of women characters who do different things in combat. It's not that they were all like just like
White
a
mages.
certain type of attack. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Final Fantasy games kind of lean into that, where you'll be pigeonholed in who you're actually adding. Even the male characters have a bit of redundancy in this game that I would say that the women characters maybe don't. Like, if you think about it, a lot of the male characters like Crono, Frog, and Robo, for example, as y'all mentioned, all are like very heavy in the attack department. That's not necessarily adding anything new to your repertoire in your party. And I just think that all of that stuff is kind of fun for me personally when I was playing this game. And I think I had a secondary point, but it's gone.
I think maybe it'll come back when I say I think it's not unique in games for a protagonist to die partway through the game. But I think what makes this really special is that it's a party-based JRPG, and I can't. Again, I'm a newbie to this kind of thing, but like that seems pretty novel to have your main character, who is especially one drawn by Akira Toriyama, who's like is sort of legendary in the world of manga and anime, if you will, and then having to play without him potentially for the rest of the game, depending on if you decide to take the ending exit at that point.
Yeah, so that was the other point I wanted to get to. Thank you. Is exactly that. Is you suddenly have a hole in your party that like most games aren't going to make you fill, but this game, however temporarily, because this character isn't dead forever necessarily, spoilers, is like, okay, you have to now accommodate your playstyle around something that is now taken away from you, and it's the protagonist. So that, to me, is a huge shift, or at least when I played this game for the first time, despite this game being 30 years old, is like a rather interesting dynamic to spin the player into. Like you not only have a shift in the dynamic of how you do combat, there's now a void. Like, it's not something you can replace necessarily, at least right away. So
I didn't feel that big of a change in gameplay, because you do have such like melee heavy characters already that I typically rolled with Crono and then to Frog, who is melee heavy but also has healing and water. Like I would roll with Crono, Frog, and then usually Luca, sometimes Marl. So I really was like, okay, which melee heavy character could I swap in there? And I could have, and my party would have felt honestly almost the same, aside from like the character, the protagonist being gone and the story-wise, character-wise. But as far as gameplay, it wouldn't have felt that different. But I actually I think I added Marl. Like, I think I had Frog, Luca, and Marl. and then it did change my gameplay a little bit. So it did. It didn't have to, but so I didn't think it forced me to change my gameplay that much, but I ended up doing it, which is nice. So like this thing that it threw out to me ended up changing it, even though I didn't have to. So I appreciated it.
You just mentioned the characters that you were playing as your team, and I'm just like so different than mine. Like I primarily like Crono was there the whole time until he died, and then I felt like Luca felt like the default leader, and so I kept Luca in my team.
Yeah. As like the secondary leader,
as my secondary, it felt right to have Luca be my secondary leader. And then, so I had Luca, and then I pretty much used like Magus and Isla, like the rest of it, which was, I loved Isla like obviously, but it's funny because like Marl was like the one I probably used the least besides Robo. I found if I needed water, I used Frog instead because I liked Frog better. Yeah. And I wanted to use Frog over Magus, but then I kind of just was like, maybe, cheaping my way out because Magus was so strong that I was just like, I'm just going to use all this magic and give him a gold earring and he's good for a while. And it's super easy to just kind of like plow through the rest of the game. But very interesting. Like you mentioned those characters and I was like, oh yeah, I barely used Marl, and I like Frog I used sparingly, like except for like their quests and stuff. But yeah, it was like Isla and Magus and Crono for me most of the time.
So I also didn't use Marl that much unless I was like, unless I needed an extra healer. But I'm realizing that as you're saying this, that I kind of went with the characters that I felt were the most story forward, that led the story the most. And then the people who felt like secondary characters are kind of the ones that I left as secondaries, because yes, Crono, obviously main protagonist. Luca felt like the other leader because she knew how the time warping worked, and it felt like she was directing the team that way. And then Frog had just such a big story, like an arcing story that kind of went across different time periods. And I also just liked Frog. I liked his attacks. I liked the way he swung his sword. So
Frog's awesome.
I feel like I just ended up with the three characters that I felt were the most, forward story-wise. And like the most actively involved in the story.
That's where I think I did myself a disservice a little bit, because sometimes when something is happening in the story, your side characters are going to react. They might have a little bit of flavor text or something like that. And 9 times out of 10, Isla's going, Isla, fight. And that's pretty much the extent of it. So like, I do feel like I missed out on maybe some interesting interactions or some interesting character beats or some added flavor to the story. Whereas I barely used Marl. And so then when I ended up like, by the time you resurrect Crono and Marl's a big part of like that sequence, it felt a smidge unearned for me. Like their relationship didn't feel earned because I was like, I've barely used Marl, and then the other person there was Luca, which it worked, but also most of the time, like even at the very end, I'm using Isla for the final boss and she's going like, Isla angry, like, and it's not like it's not as sentimental. It's not as powerful. It's more like
substantive. Like
right. So as much as I loved her, she did cause my story experience to kind of dwindle a smidge, but that's okay. She made up for it in other ways.
Like her horniness.
Also hilarious.
My goodness. I love they talk about like her appetite, and I'm like, geez,
all the time.
Okay, yeah, she's very forward.
So she likes food. She likes food, right?
Very feminist.
Yeah. Only talking about food.
She likes strong men and strong women, and that's all that matters. Yeah.
Flora, did you have a point you wanted to jump in on?
Other than strong women, I mean, one of the things that I would like to point out is that in most games that give me an opportunity to have an all-women JRPG sort of party, I'm going to lean in that direction. Just kind of always have. Feels more fun, more comfortable, whatever. This game, weirdly, I didn't do that in the late game. And when y'all were talking about some of your party decisions just now, it made me think about it. Like, Magus and Frog were both in my party pretty much universally towards the end, There were some alternations between like Marl and Robo and Isla and some others as far as like who was going to slot into that third spot. But weirdly, like it was one of those games for me where the characterization of the character didn't surpass the functionality of the character in combat.
Yeah.
Where the diversity of who you have in your party as far as what they can do far outstripped how I felt about them as characters or how I felt about them as like story beats or whatever. And that's to me rather unique because a lot of JRPGs don't really force me to have to like think about those as separate things. A lot of JRPGs will allow me to be like, oh, I love this hot girl who channels lightning, and like, okay, like now I have a lightning girl in my party. Yay!
You can make it work typically, and then this game sometimes it makes it very difficult.
This game doesn't make it hard to make it work, but I think part of it is the symptom of me playing with a walkthrough. So like there were some battles where it was like, put this person in your party.
Right.
But there was also like, if memory serves, because again, it's been like 5-6 years, like these characters have different magical abilities or like different melee abilities or whatever. And like some heal more and some do more like there's like techs, I think, which I don't think y'all really talked about on podcast number 1.
We did not.
Techs are, if I recall, like, you kind of have like a trio of all of your characters combine their abilities in like a little coagulation where like you do some mega attack, but it is entirely contingent upon who's in the party. And so like that was a thought as well. Like sometimes going into a big boss fight, I would throw in a different character just to make sure that I'm following the walkthrough or making sure that I have that tech ready. And so like all of those things considered, my normal gameplay with JRPGs is just like, whoever I like is going to go in the party. In this game, it was so much more like strategic and functional. So, Jacob.
And then to like plus up your thought about techs is that you can't just decide, oh, I'm going to start using Robo and hopefully these techs between all characters work. It's not really like nurturing the text, but you have to use all 3 characters in combination to be able to get access to those texts. So, you know, from what I remember from our last episode, I was you guys kind of not reamed me out, but said like, hey, you're using 2 water characters, dummy. You should use somebody with a different
It wasn't
element.
that harsh. Calm down.
It was really nice. I'm just
He's a sensitive boy.
I'm a sensitive boy.
Fair.
So I did try to test and put Luca in. So essentially it was going with usually Chrono, Frog, and then trying to throw Luca in there. And I know that I should have done it, and I know that it brought together some really good techs that bring in lightning, fire, and water, but I just really liked Frog, and I wanted him to be in my party.
Frog is so cool, man. No shame. Frog rocks.
Yeah.
I used essentially no techs. Because
what?
I
Really?
didn't. Okay, you know why? Because
Psychopath.
That's like essential.
Maybe I would have had an easier time. I don't know. But you know what? Maybe this is why. Okay.
How long did you play this game? 70 hours?
How dare you?
25, right?
Sir.
I mean, I guess it wasn't an impediment. She finished quicker than I did.
I will say, Jacob, the final boss, I think it took me 4 attempts. And after the first 3, I actually said to my husband, I said, I'm having trouble, you know, I gotta take another run at it, this or that. And I'm like, you know what? But like, Jacob did it. So like, I know I can do it.
How dare you?
That's what my friends say about me, Jacob. It's okay.
He's sensitive and he can't do boss battles.
You are
Jacob, you be
self-admittedly
Returnal.
bad
Don't
at
let her-
video games. You state
am.
it all the time. You say me bad
Yeah.
at video games.
Jacob
Anyway.
beat Returnal and got further than
Yes.
me in Bloodborne, so I need to be the punching bag.
I'm a meme.
Maybe that's why you had an easier time than me at the final boss. But no, so
Damn.
okay, the thing is that using like a triple tech, I was like, but I have to wait for everyone to be ready. And it just felt so limiting. Whereas I was like, no, so this person's ready, I can do this. Like I wanted to like be ahead and like be super proactive, and that felt like, well, I'm gonna wait, and then they're gonna attack me, and the next thing you know, this person's gonna be low, and then they're gonna die, and now I'm gonna be screwed. So I was like, no, I gotta be like going at all times, and I didn't want to take that pause. And then someone in the Discord sent something about, the triple text, and I was like, the triple text. maybe I should try and do that. And I just couldn't do it. I loaded up the game and I was like, nah, not for me.
I think some of those techs are especially almost required when you get to like the many forms of Lavos.
They are in fact not. I can tell you that they are
Yeah,
not required
yeah,
because
obviously.
I did it. Again, I probably
That's
didn't take
nuts.
time. But.
Question for those of you who have played this more recently: did anyone pay attention to the numbers that Triple Tech does as opposed to a more standard attack or something like that? Like, does it mathematically come across as advantageous to like team up like that, or is there in fact a disadvantage there? I have no idea.
Double techs felt like they weren't, and that's why I basically abandoned them. I did it like twice, and then I was like, that didn't feel worth it, so never mind. But I don't know.
I would sometimes find that the doubles weren't worth it. The thing is, especially the final boss, I had Magus, and he doesn't have any triple text with anyone. He doesn't do any double or triple text with anyone. So
doesn't he also have like multi attacks though?
He does. But
Okay.
he just doesn't have any text that combined with others, kind of giving that like loner vibe that he has, right? So I didn't have to use those, but I did use like a lot of single text, like, you know, like using magic spells or like Isla's like Dino Tail or doing, you know what I mean, a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah,
like,
I use singles. I use a lot of singles, but no combos.
Yeah, I didn't rely much on combos, but I'm surprised, Katie. Yeah, 4 times. Took me 1 shot to go all the way through the thing, but that's because like I did I don't know if you did every single side quest, but I got like the best weapon I could possibly get. Like, you know, I was like as maxed out as I probably could be. So I found the final boss very easy, despite the fact that like Lavos is kind of terrifying. Like, like very scary, like very, very, very good boss design because he's scary. Like I felt threatened, and the sound effect, all of it, Lavos, really, really, really well done. I was scared, and I'm like, didn't expect to be scared. I was like, okay, whatever. But like, I felt threatened by him, even though it was pretty easy once I had maxed out almost everything.
I think that I'm not remotely scared by Lavos. I think that's a fun little like reaction difference. Like I think Lavos is silly, especially as you get into the further forms of it.
Yeah,
like
the later form, you know,
like
what?
the alien forms.
The alien form gives me a weird, uncanny feeling. Where
it's
here's this like
goofy to me.
humanoid form. It's creepy to me. Where
the original form is the most intimidating, right?
Yeah, but it's like this otherworldly scary that like I cannot comprehend kind of scary. Like you try to think about it. That's what kind of hits me, is if I think too hard about that is the scariest part of it, right?
I think that's completely valid. Yeah, that makes sense.
My point of reference for Toriyama is Dragonball, and so I very much liken Lavos to like a Frieza or a Cell in that they have multiple forms. The first forms you think are like the scary one, but then
the tiny one is
the tiny one is actually the scariest one.
I see. Yeah,
that's the
I
Dragon
hate this
Ball
analogy. It's so accurate, but it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, the last form just like disgusted me in many different ways.
It's gross, man. It is
gross, man.
I loved the like Russian nesting doll aspect of Lavos.
Yeah.
How you're like, oh, this is it. And it's like, no, that's a shell. Get in there and fight the real one. Also reminded me very much, it just made me think of the first Men in Black movie when there's like the alien, but inside the alien there's like a little tiny alien that's controlling the big alien. That's what I thought of.
That's it. Oh my God.
Did you struggle? So in what part of that fight did you really struggle, Katie? Was it the third form that you really struggled with?
It was right at the end. It was basically the final stage. I don't know. He'd get like a big attack and someone would be dwindled down. I'd be like rushing to try and heal them and I just wouldn't do it in time or something. It would just kind of happen. And then the fourth one, I was like, oh, that was smooth. Like I just made it through. I also appreciate they subvert your expectations with the final form where you think that obviously the main thing in the middle is going to be the thing that you have to beat and that the two small floating things are like his support enemies that will heal or do whatever. But no, it's actually one of the little support guys on the right is actually Lavos who's running the show. It's a cool little element where I was like, wait, that's the guy I have to beat. No. And then I'm like, oh no, it's this other one. When it says like Lavos defense is down. So I'm like, great. And I hit the middle thing and I'm like, but that wasn't different. And then I'm like, oh, it's because it's this one. And also the fact that Lavos ups its defense and drops its defense, that indicates to you which one is the real Lavos, because otherwise you wouldn't know unless you defeated the middle one and you were like, oh, it's not over. That's the only way you would know otherwise. So them adding that element indicates to you which ones, and it's just such smart game design.
That's the thing. It's smart game design.
Stuff.
I really felt, I mean, I played this with the walkthrough, so it was told to me when I started that fight that would be like a bit of a gimmick, but I still think that like, how would I encounter that if I didn't know what I was leaning into here? Like, it sounds like all of y'all did that sort of organically, if I had to guess, unless I'm probably the only one who like had the walkthrough, like, I don't want to say spoil me, but like it preempted me to be skeptical and like think about what I was going to engage with attacking wise. I think that's brilliant. And again, it's one of those things that like this game is so freaking old that it's like, who thought of this? Yeah. Like, that's cool. Like it recognized what tropes were in the JRPG genre. It iterated on those tropes, subverted those tropes, and delivered something that's still almost 30 years later takes you by surprise, unless you're really considering what you're doing. Katie, what were you going to add?
Just that it does all those things, and then it thinks through like, okay, but how do we let the players into this with the indicator? It's like you said, it's just great.
And yeah, it's not even just this final boss. Almost every boss had a little gimmick like this that you're kind of learning along the way. So you kind of half expect it, but every boss is a little bit of a puzzle, right? Where you're like, oh, I can't hit it with lightning or it's going to counter. Or even like the minor bosses have those kinds of things that you have to kind of, or even minor enemies that you're fighting. Like, oh, this, I didn't realize fire was going to heal that thing. Like you're always kind of learning on the fly, which was nice. You're trying to just kind of remember as you're going. Sometimes it's annoying when like you're repeatedly like you keep making the same mistake, or you're like, oh shoot, I like, or like the same enemy keeps popping back up, and you're like, okay, I'm tired of like having to slowly dwindle you down with physical attacks when I just want to like luminary you all to pieces. Like it's annoying when I can't. When I wanted to like zip through some of the final battles, like especially because like I did the Black Omen. I don't know if everyone else went through that whole. I did. So, and that was extremely time consuming. Like I expected maybe like a couple boss fights, but there was like level upon enemy fight, and it just felt like it just kept going. And I think by the end of the Black Omen, I was like, okay, I'm ready to wrap this up. And then there's like 4 more Lavos fights, and then it's like, okay, when is this gonna end? But like it worked in the end, but I think the Black Omen was a smidge long because it just felt a little repetitive.
And is that the one where you had to go through every major boss like as you were fighting that, or was that the Lavos fight?
Yeah, it kind of does that, I think, where she takes like the form, not the form, but like the attributes of every major boss as you're going through. So you're like, oh God, what was the thing? What was the gimmick on this boss?
How was I going to remember that?
No, that was where I was like, I don't know. So here's my walkthrough. Like, I need to like look this up because I'm like, I don't remember how to. I played that boss like 40 hours ago at this point. Not 40, but like it's, you know, I don't remember how I beat that boss or like where the weak point was. So a lot of that was using a walkthrough for me. But that's where it felt a little bit like maybe excessive, where it was like, okay, are you just padding out the time here? Like, because I don't need to replay, like I don't need to do a boss rush at the end. Like
it dragged.
It was fine. Just a little bit. If I had to give one critique, there was just a smidge of a drag in that Black Omen section. But also, it's totally optional. So you could still just decide to finish this game. You won't get the good ending, I guess, if you really want to. But it's still, like, optional. But it was a smidge of a drag.
I think I agree that it was a bit of a drag, but the thing that I appreciated about it is that I didn't have to use a walkthrough for every single boss, or like when you had to go through some of the major enemies, because I remembered some of the, hey, the dragon robot, I have to do this.
Yeah.
This other boss I have to do, like, that just showed me that, like, hey, I was paying attention.
Right.
Hey, I learned things. Hey, I know how to play this game. Hey, I'm good at video games. And although it dragged a bit, it is optional. I think it's the only way you can get New Game Plus. I think
so. Yes.
Yeah, but optional to your point. But again, you can take the off ramp to the end at hour 1 if you want. You can't, but you can.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of something that I'm interested in here, which is Black Omen is framed here as an optional excursion that you can engage with. There's a lot more optional stuff in this game, and there's a lot of end game stuff, like bosses and like. Especially, I'm thinking of End of Time. Like, as far as there's a very, very particular boss-related thing that you can do in that End of Time era. If y'all know what I'm talking about, there's like that limbo. There's like a limbo period of time in this game where like you go and there's like a fenced-in little like area, and it's like dark, and you can go into a little side room there.
Oh,
instead of, like,
with the new that was there, or it wasn't new for me, but that's where you learn magic, right?
Yes, but it's I think again, it's been a long time, but I there's like a very specific boss fight you can do there. There's other stuff as well, and regardless of the specifics, I'm curious how much additional or optional boss content any of y'all engaged with. Like Black Omen makes sense, but like, was there any of that End of Time stuff or anything like that y'all dabbled with, Katie?
Optional bosses outside of the Black Omen, I don't think so.
Okay. Maybe the character quests, though?
Let me look it up real quick.
I looked at the character quests. I checked a walkthrough, like, how do I do these character quests? How do I go about them? Honestly, story-wise and, like, individual emotional character development-wise, I thought that those were the best moments of the whole game, which honestly frustrated me a little bit. That's my nitpick at this game, to be honest, is that all that stuff was held to the end, and it's optional. And I'm like, no, we should have done these things.
And it's like character
10
growth
hours
stuff.
ago.
And it's character moments and growth and like interactions between the characters that we weren't really getting that much in the main plot. It could have been sprinkled throughout the story a little bit more, as opposed to like, here's your list of go through all your characters and give them all like a personal quest, right? Like,
I think most of the main story had a lot of like the overarching plot and the time dimension stuff and like the big stuff. But yeah, the little character stuff was kind of held off to the end. Like Luca and Robo broke my heart. With Luca's side, character
with her mom
quest,
and everything,
with their incident with her mom, and she gets injured by basically a machine, and Luca can't stop it. So then she, that's her thing of like, I need to like know machines. But then Robo comforts her, and it's like, it got me. And that was honestly the first time in the whole game that I really felt like, like that emotionally hit me.
More of that would have been good.
Yeah, like I just wish it was sprinkled through the game instead of just held off to the end as optional content.
Yeah.
Even the little things within that, I think that it might be that side quest where Robo has to like essentially sit in one place for 400 years.
Yes.
And to like just leave Robo behind.
Such a good use of the time travel thing. I love that.
It is, yes.
That's a Nier Automata thing too. Like, I know that's 30 years down the pipe, but like, that's why that hits in that game too. Like you make a robot character or a character in general like endure time by themselves, and all of a sudden like that's not only one of the most tragic stories you can think of, it's also one of the most meaningful. Yeah,
I think outside of the stuff that happened with Frog, which like Frog is god tier as far as like what happened to him and the tragedy that he has, like Robo was a very close second.
Robo's great.
And even like the small moments, like the campfire moment, that to me was just like such a, like, I can't imagine Chrono Trigger without that campfire moment.
And it's crazy that you could just completely miss it.
Yeah.
Because it's not even tied to a character quest. It's tied to like Fiona, who is just some rando person complaining about the desert. Like you're not. You have to do so many things to make that even happen.
Yeah.
That it's such a little. It's a great little piece of storytelling that it's so easily missed if you didn't make sure someone saved a sapling like millions of years ago. Like I love the butterfly effect that this game does, but it's easy to miss these things if you're not paying attention, which is disappointing for someone who maybe who didn't have access to a walkthrough right at the time.
That's the thing, is the walkthrough point is I think this game is better served with the walkthrough. I'm going to commit to that viewpoint because I think most games, most people don't want to be told what to do, and they just want to like figure out what to do and like explore, and that's half the fun of what playing a game is like. A game like this has layers to it, and it has layers to it in the sense of not just like time periods. It has cause and effect thing, like what you just mentioned, Travis, which is either you noticed the sapling or you didn't, which I would not have noticed that.
Right.
I think that makes a game like this better because you see the things that are optional. And I think being told what the optional things are and doing them and then noticing like what the potential like lack of your action could have done makes you appreciate a game like this more. Or at least that's how I feel about it, because like I did all the things. I followed a walkthrough. I have seen, as far as I'm concerned, all, or at least most, of the optional content. I know what this game is doing. If I just played this raw, and I just kind of like stumbled through it and like took guesses and like time traveled 8 different times in the wrong direction before I finally figured out where I needed to go or whatever, like probably most players would have done, I don't think I would look at this game as this seamless masterpiece that I do. I think it's the fact that I've seen this game work together within itself, and that makes me appreciate it as like a coherent thing. So, Katie.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting argument of like, oh, the game without a walkthrough, and maybe you miss all these things, but then it's so many people just wouldn't appreciate it as much as they do because of availability of walkthroughs and seeing all the things. But then it leaves, I'm assuming that the creators were thinking, one, that you could buy a strategy guide at the time, I guess.
Of course,
but, sure. But I don't know, maybe they're thinking like, oh, people will revisit it and they'll discover things they didn't know, and now that the game will live on longer, like it will increase its life cycle, I guess.
It's like a legacy, like people, word of mouth. People are like, oh, did you hear about what happened in Chrono Trigger at that ending? It's like, what ending? What?
Exactly. Of like, oh, you got to go back and play it this way, and like some people will do that, and then their appreciation will grow.
100%.
But then it's very limiting to how many people are going to see that content. So it's difficult.
I think I would have loved, like, I knew that I needed to, let's say, save that sapling to make sure that these things, because I did see that in the walkthrough. If I had discovered that organically and
how cool is that?
How cool would that moment have landed if I had done the steps without previous knowledge that it was going to happen, and then it ends up being this wonderful campfire story that leads to Lucas thing. Like it would have landed so well. The game was maybe a little too obtuse about making sure that you did find it, which I'm okay with, but I don't know if I would have found it naturally.
I agree with that.
It's a big game.
Yeah. And I think that's the part where I'm like, maybe, like, not that I need the game to handhold me. I don't want a game to handhold me, but it was a little like you don't think of these connections unless you're thinking very, very broad, like huge scope, like how could this possibly, but then you could literally talk to every single person and every little bit of flavor text could mean something. And what are you going to like parse? Like you're going to comb over every bit of dialogue. Like, so I could see the reason to, like the walkthrough is valid, but I think if I would have discovered that organically, it would have hit so much better. Not that it didn't already hit good, but I think if I didn't, I wish I didn't know, but I don't think I would have seen it otherwise.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not a big JRPG person. This is kind of baby's first JRPG, but I think a lot about Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 when I think about this game.
Mass Effect 2 is actually a really good comparison for this game, weirdly enough. Go on.
For those who've not played, the loyalty missions in that one
That's what I was
essentially
thinking of,
give
yeah.
very important backstory for all your crewmates that will then have an effect on the ending of the game. Very similar to this. But those are really tough to miss.
That's the thing.
I can't imagine playing Mass Effect 2 or 3.
The Mass Effect character stories are there for you. Like, they are in the mission list that says, like, oh, take so-and-so to go to there. And it says that is
you don't
so-and-so's
know exactly what it
story.
is?
No, you don't know what's going to happen. But they are listed like so-and-so's character story. Like, go do that. So yes, you're right. It is a little more pointed out to you. Not the repercussions of your actions.
Right.
But the side missions are. Also, just like the character interactions depending on who's in your party. It did make me think it's like early days Mass Effect of like, well, if you have these two people, they're going to talk to each other like this. And if they're not, then it'll be a different conversation. That's awesome. It also adds to the replayability.
Yeah. I had another point, but Flora, take it away. It'll come back to me.
Oh, there's not much. I was just giving like nods and thumbs up to Katie in the webcam. I Mass Effect 2 is literally the comparison I would give to this game. Like, I haven't played Mass Effect 3, so I can't say anything about that game. But like Mass Effect 1, almost insignificant side quests. Like who cares? Like if you pay attention to your crewmates or not. But Mass Effect 2 is like you're not playing Mass Effect 2 if you don't play the side stuff. Like that is essential to the story and understanding who these characters are. Chrono Trigger is that for me, as far as JRPGs go. Like, there are some JRPGs that I play. Let's say Final Fantasy is a common category, but many others where the side stuff only helps you in terms of like stats, like it like levels you up or whatever, or like you get a new ability or whatever. But in Crono and Mass Effect, but specifically we're talking about Crono, you understand the character better and you see them more complexly. And yeah, you might get the extra ability or you might get the extra stat, and yay, great. But to me, the thing that kept me going with Crono, and the reason that I still think of this game so fondly, is like I can still remember those side things. Like that's rare. Like a side quest being memorable in a JRPG is like saying that like a piece of sidewalk in the middle of an industrial city is going to be like something that you think about tonight. Like no, like you're gonna step
really
over it and not think twice.
What simile you're going to use there? I'm like, where are we going? What are we saying?
My analogies are broken. I'm in a new city now, so I guess that's it. But I personally find Chrono Trigger, it has flaws, and I will acknowledge the flaws. I find the character presentation, like the way that the characters are fit into the main narrative, something that most games could still learn from. And that's the extent of what I want to say.
Yeah, I think to your point, the game does have flaws, and I think that like it's good to recognize that even within these side quests, some of them are weaker than others. And they all can't be bangers. Like I think Robo's side quest is kind of silly. He finds a female robot and then fights a big like
Mama robot,
the bad guy from Star
Yeah,
Fox.
but Mother Brain Robot was bleeping bleep bleep bleep. Loved her.
You thought she was hot too.
I just was like, oh, angry. This is Shodan mommy issues with System Shock all over again. Like it's just like she's.
I can't top that. So
I feel like every time Flora's
die.
on an episode, I have to like mommy issues are brought up in some way. I don't know.
Shodan mommy issues.
I mean,
huh?
like that's accurate. But how dare you?
And like moral side quest is sort of silly too. Of like, you know, oops, there's an alien who's actually king.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is what it is, Katie.
But another thing that we mentioned earlier that is an option. It's not optional, but there is an option. So you all kept Magus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Did anyone not?
Okay, I have a story.
Katie.
Okay,
Oh, yes,
does
your
anyone have
story.
anything I want to say about Magus? About because whatever, you know. Anybody
I don't
want to
have-
talk about it at all before I tell my story?
No, I want to know your
Magus
story.
had an MP3 player that had Sum 41 on it.
Wow. What the
I don't know. He's just.
I know
emo.
this is a PG-13 or whatever podcast, but like, what?
I don't know. I just see him as my emo friend. And Katie,
All
tell
right.
me a story about my emo friend.
It's
Okay.
fine.
So I am playing on my couch on my laptop, and I'm just with keyboard. My mouse is on the coffee table. I'm sitting there. I'm playing. My spouse was watching something. I'm on the couch next to him, and then this choice comes up, and I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. Let me think about this. This is significant. And I kind of sit back and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And he notices that I'm thinking really hard. Then he's like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I don't know.
Magus or your husband?
Magus is like, why are you thinking about? No, my husband is like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to fight this guy or not. I feel like I don't want to, but you know what? I want to check. I need to check the walkthrough to know if it's as like critical that I bring him in. I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I'm leaning towards keeping him, but I'm not decided yet. He jokingly like, haha, he's done this before, but like he would never, ever mess with a game of mine, ever. Like he just wouldn't. He knows this stuff means a lot to me. He would never
Keep
do
her.
it. But he's like, haha, teasing, like pretends to like reach at my keyboard. And I'm like, haha, you're not going to do it, but haha.
That's not even funny.
And then he's like, ha, no, I wouldn't do that. But then he reaches over and he touches the mouse on the coffee table, which I didn't think did anything.
No.
And he didn't even mean to click it. But
No.
he accidentally clicked it and
No.
chose to fight Magus. And I went, and I was like, oh my God. And his jaw dropped. Like he was like, oh my God. Like he looked at me like he was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do it. And he was so upset. And I'm like, it's okay. I can reload a save if I need to. But then I was like, you know what? This is a better story. I'm going to roll with this decision. This is what happened. You know, this is the way it decided to go.
Katie
so that's why I
accidentally
fought
committed murder.
Magus, and that's why Magus wasn't in my party.
You fought Magus?
I didn't mean to. It
You
just
committed
happened.
to the bit? You didn't reload?
No, I was like, you know what? I should have. Like, I looked at the walkthrough. I was like, yep. I should have not fought Magus. That's what I should have done. But
I have never
For
met
some
someone who's
reason.
fought Magus.
I was
This
just
is-
like, nah, I'll roll with it. It's okay.
I feel betrayed. I feel like Matt Stormageddon would feel betrayed.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
What is this? This hurts.
yeah. And yeah, he just kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm like, it's okay.
I would apologize too. He
Yeah.
messed up.
Couples who
I'll
murder
never
together stay together.
Yeah, no, good times and hard times. It's okay.
Yeah.
He needs more than a simple apology. You need to remind him of this conversation once it comes out and be like,
So Magus wasn't there. So what kind of a character is Magus? What kind of a fighter are they? What do they do? Because I don't know.
It's all magic. It's all magic.
Only magic.
Every type of magic, like the number 2 magic of everything, and then like a bunch of dark magic stuff at the end. Like if you keep
Yeah.
leveling them up.
he's very good
It's
for magic.
Yeah, it's just very powerful magic stuff, but very silent, very like not a talker. I mean, angry at Lavos, like pointing his finger like, bah, 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 I'm gonna kill you, Lavos, and then that's essentially it. And then I got Isla in the corner being like, me hungry, and so like and Crono doesn't say anything, so like there wasn't a lot of talking happening, but yeah, he's quiet, he's sullen, I think there's
Also-
more interesting stuff because of the Queen Zeal stuff, especially if he's in those fights. There's a little bit more like flavor text that happens, but it is interesting. He's an interesting character to see that, like, how he jumped through time and is butterfly affecting his way around to cause different things to happen.
Yeah.
Also, I love that you basically pour one out for Toma.
Yeah.
And you go up to, he literally goes up to the grave and is like, we're going to pour one out. I was like, what?
Damn.
Where are we? What is happening right now?
This game is more mature than it needs to be.
Yes.
There's a main ending, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's like at least over a dozen other endings, and on the PC version there's 13 achievements, which I think are all tied to specific endings. I want to know, the standard ending is Beyond Time, which is, I think, what all of us probably did, where you fight Lavos in the final form after resurrecting Crono. Mm-hmm. But did anyone experience another ending?
So I like YouTubed a couple endings, basically, just to see like how different they were, and they didn't seem that different. So I was kind of like, that's good. I'm done. So I don't really know the depth of it, because maybe what I saw was, the least different endings. I don't know.
I Googled them too, and there was one that I found entertaining. I didn't get this ending, but it is one, I don't know where you have to fight Lavos at in the game to get this, but essentially you change the timeline so that Frog marries the queen and then Marl ends up becoming half frog.
What?
That's hot.
No way. That's cool. I like that.
She starts ribbiting and stuff, which is like, I watch it and it's like, because like
so progressive.
You end the thing, she goes back to the castle and her king father is hopping around and is like,
so
do you want to watch
this
wedding video from our ancestors? And it goes up on screen and Marl starts ribbiting and she's bouncing around, and then you see Frog and the queen walking up the aisle. I don't know what happened to the king there, but I mean, Frog became
just let them ribbit and hop and leap out their way into
love that,
happiness. Like, we don't need to judge.
That's the only one that I thought was really entertaining. I didn't see much other ones that like I thought were interesting.
Yeah, you're describing the successor of Guardia ending, which you do after you save Lean and Marl. That's when you go and you try and beat fight Lavos, and it's an achievement on PC as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But yeah, there's a couple, like, obviously I think what most players will see is Beyond Time if they get Crono back, and then if they don't get Crono back, they get the reunion timeline, which like is relatively similar, except obviously Crono is dead. But did you have another one that you wanted to cover off, Flora? Or
no, I also got the Beyond Time ending. I felt when hearing about you all speak about your experiences that for some reason that I had done other endings, and I feel like I have, but I guess that's just the nature of this game. Like, if I don't have the achievement, then it didn't happen, right? So I guess one of the deceptions of the narrative of how this game unfolds is like, I kind of thought that I had other endings, but if the achievement list is that brief, then that tells me that the game is very, very effective at like tricking me into thinking that it's over repeatedly. I don't know if any of y'all felt that way, but like there are some apocalyptic endings that is like, to me that would be an achievement, but like on Steam it's not. I have 7% of the achievements here, so clearly I only got Beyond Time. I'm thinking like that doesn't feel correspondent to my experience in a way that like many other, let's say, choice ending based games might otherwise feel.
I want to go back to just one thing. Was anyone else completely thrown for a loop once we got involved with the like futuristic fantasy island, Sky Island people in like 12,000 BC? And I was like, wait, where am I? When am I? Who are these people? What's going on? And then that attached to Lavos so much, where they were basically trying to be more powerful than they already are, or the queen wanted to like be immortal, basically. Was like, no, I'm going to draw power from Lavos. I'm like, you fool. But yeah, once I got up there and I was like, but I'm in the past, but I'm up here and it's like a future-y, like I don't know what's going on. I think that's where I lost the plot a little bit, where I was like, I don't know who's who and where we're going and what's happening.
That's where I thought I must have royally messed up the timeline. I thought there's no way I must have
that
screwed.
You caused this to happen?
I caused this to happen, and then come to realize that like, oh no, this was destined to fail. And it's interesting to think about like, was it destined to fail because of my interference or not? Like, I think this game plays with time travel in an interesting way, where sometimes you can have time travel stories where this was the story, it always was, time doesn't change, you always went back in time and you always caused this effect and it always happens. or you can actually go back in time and change the future. Or essentially, you know what I mean? So this game plays with that in different ways, where it does both, which is interesting. Where you can actually go back in time and change the future, but then it also sometimes plays with the idea of like, oh no, you had to have already have done this in order for this to have happened in the first place. So I tend to like stories where the time travel is it always happened, like you always had to go back, but it's that portion where you're going into the islands in the sky. I thought, oh, I messed something up. Like this wasn't supposed to be like this, and Lavos came way too early. I screwed up. Like now we got to fix this, and like yeah, you end up sinking this whole thing in order to like get to the ending. But it is an interesting. You are directly affecting the future because of your actions in that part of the game.
This is bringing me back to a conversation I had with Travis many years ago, because he just consumes a lot of content that involves time travel, because he loves time travel
we
so
love
much
this.
that we were discussing the movie Looper. And I remember the moment when he said, very seriously, unironically, he said to me, you know, because I know a lot about time travel. and I burst out laughing. I'm like, oh, Travis. And he's like, well, I do. I'm like, no, but the tone that you said that in was so perfect. Like, I know a lot about time travel.
I like my time travel rules
and
to be clear.
He started iterating on the time travel in Chrono Trigger, and I was like, Travis.
I need my time
armchair
travel rules to be
scientist,
clear.
please.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just need the rules to be clear. I don't
Yes.
need wishy-washy rules on my time travel. And so I like that this one played with the idea that you could change things.
Can I just throw in there real quick that I think that this game, and I'm also a connoisseur of time travel narratives. I'm going to go ahead and defer to Travis and say that Travis probably has more of an affinity than I do, but like I love a good time travel narrative. I think this game establishes some extremely coherent logic for how time travel works. Therefore, I don't give a crap how it uses its system because it's all internally consistent. Like, I don't notice a single plot hole or like breaking point within the time travel logic of this game. To me, it all coheres, and so like I'm not willing to question a lot of it. I just wanted to throw that out there because, again, like it sounds condescending. 1995 as like a big like era of like this could be a mess. This could be a we threw this together, but it's frankly not. And like you're sitting there and the time travel system works. Like it's like I believe it. I could write a novel using this logic and not have to like invent stuff. That's really cool to me as someone who likes time travel narratives.
It's just thoughtful. That's the thing. It's thoughtful. You could easily just skip over the logistics of it, but it works within the story and it makes the story make more sense because you're not just kind of being like, oh, I guess time travel, explain it away and just kind of hand wave it. You don't have to because, no, it makes sense within the scope of the story. So,
totally. Yeah.
Any final thoughts about Chrono Trigger?
There's probably a lot we didn't touch,
people wanna talk
man.
about sprites?
Sprites, yeah.
Just briefly.
Sprite Work looks great.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah. No, true. Katie, we can talk about this.
I
for a minute,
don't need to talk about it, but I don't know if you guys do.
I do. The art, I think the character design with the sprites is something that still stands the test of time really well.
Yep.
Like, there's not a single character in this game, even an NPC, that I like remotely confuse with our main protagonist like cast. Like every character is loving and crafted. Even like throwaway stuff. Like at the beginning of this game, y'all talked in part 1 a little bit about like the little fair that happens at the very beginning of the game. And there's like a I don't know if I'm misremembering this, but I think there's like a robot who does like rap battles with you or whatever. Okay, I'm glad that's not like a mismemory.
That robot is Gato.
That's distinct. I'm not going to confuse that guy with anybody else. Like there's just a lot of things in this game that feel very remotely like singular in a sense. And I don't feel a sense that this game is trying to like ever be lazy. This is one of the biggest mainstream sort of game release passion projects that I've ever seen. Like this is almost like a Death Stranding level of like someone loved this idea and just like committed to the bit and had the budget to commit to the bit, and we have this like perennial classic because of that. Like, there's issues, like Death Stranding has issues, but like I don't care about those issues. Like, this is a cool game. Like, I don't know. So those are my final thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, the sprite work is like, to your point, all the way down to like the roly-polies in the forest. To
Dead
like
serious. There's not a wasted sprite.
Yeah, and the koalas are great. I could go on, but
koalas, I forgot about those.
The koalas are those little like
it's been that
like
long, I guess.
Sheep, bipedal sheep.
Bipedal sheep.
Yeah, those guys. I love those guys.
Yeah, they're very cute.
Phrase that you don't expect to hear with most video games.
This is the first JRPG I've ever played. I'm glad it was this one. I may play more. I tried the demo for Final Fantasy 16, and I know that's like there's someone yelling at the radio going like, Jacob, that's a Devil May Cry game. That's not a JRPG.
That's okay. That doesn't matter.
You gotta play it. Play it. It's so good. I love Final Fantasy 16. Like, it's maybe the most graphically impressive PlayStation 5 game. Like, I love Returnal, and that's my favorite PlayStation 5 game. So, like, we've all talked about that, minus Travis, sorry. We know what we're going for here, but, like, Final Fantasy 16 makes you think that we're in a different visual generation. It's so cool. Play it.
Yeah.
My God.
Maybe we'll pod about it one day.
Yeah, or Final Fantasy 7 Remake, because, hey, the second part of that's coming out soon. So, I love this game. I appreciate that I played it. I'm going to play more JRPGs. That's all I got to say. Let's LFG. Katie, thoughts?
I love this podcast because it makes me play games to completion, that some of which I either would have not ever, or I tried many times years before and only got, 40% of the way. I thought it was more than half. It wasn't. This is a big game. I love that I finished it. Like, I feel like, it's complete. I appreciate the story. I love the gameplay the whole time. I don't really have much bad to say. Like, it was a great game then. It's still a great game today.
Honestly, the same. I feel like this was such a hole in my gaming library of things that I've never played, and I knew nothing about it. I was like, Chrono Trigger, it's one of those, whatever, and you just, I just kind of put it into a category with like Dragon Quest and all those other things, and I just kind of just left them there, and it wasn't anything I ever thought I would ever even look at or try to play or find the time for. And like Katie said, I love this podcast because it makes me sit down and gives me a direction and tells me, hey, I'm going to play this. And I never would have without Jacob being like, we should play this. Let's play this. And the fact that I did, I'm so happy that I did, because I feel like I now know and have such an appreciation for something that is such a classic and informed so many games and stories in games going forward that I wouldn't have known where those references or where those pulls were coming from, because you can see the influences. And I'd love to go through like the games that I've played since and be like, oh, that reminds me of Chrono Trigger. Oh, that reminds me of Chrono Trigger. Like, we're talking about Mass Effect 2. Like, I wouldn't have made those links without discussing it like with you guys right now. Like, it's just interesting to think about it retrospectively, and I'm excited to kind of think about that going forward. And I'm really, really happy with my time with this game. So thank you.
I'm so glad you two came around.
Yeah,
You truly did.
Yay.
I'm sitting here swooning, by the way, like listening to y'all talk gushingly about what is for me like a top 10, top 20 sort of game is so invigorating, because I don't need y'all to feel like this game matters to you. Like, that's okay. Like you can play this game and move on. Like, I'm not gonna blink. But to hear that because of the podcast, y'all gave it the time of day that enabled it to sit inside of you and like feel like a game that was good for you, is really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to acknowledge that. And that's, I don't know. I'm very grateful that y'all were able, whether through the podcast or otherwise, to give a game that matters to me the space that I would say it deserves. And like, this isn't a game that I expect y'all to be like, hey, best friend, here's what you should play next. But like, to be able to talk about this game and be able to reference this game, like in your lexicon, I think is useful. And like, even if this game didn't work for you, I think this is one of those, like, you should have this game and like your talking points about like how games are, especially JRPGs. But like, I do really think that like this game is a touchdown for music and for sprite design and for art and for storytelling, and like especially the chronology thing. Like, again, I'm a sucker for time travel narratives, but I do think that like it's surprisingly well how coherently all of the different time periods hang together in this game. Like it should be more confusing than it is, but to me it wasn't. So anyway, just praising the game a little further. Yeah. I'm very impressed by this game.
Yes.
And hearing that it still can impress other people, even, I mean, it's only 25 years after the game came out that I played it, but like another 5 years down the line or whatever, it's still doing the same thing. Is like, that's awesome. That's encouraging. I hope this game has as much of a trail on it as it feels like it does. So
maybe it will have a broader trail when Square decides one day to remake it, because I'm sure they will.
Oh.
Y'all did a whole comprehensive,
talks.
like, which version sucks the most on the previous one, and like, that's a big issue. They should just remake the thing. Like, my goodness.
Video game preservation, who knew?
I enjoyed my Steam playthrough for what it's worth.
So hey, those are our thoughts about Chrono Trigger. If you've made it this far, thank you. As we said at the top, if you want to follow what we do, the best places to do so are on our Discord at leftbehindgame.club/discord or on Twitter at leftbehindclub. If you enjoyed this 2-part, 3-hour conversation about Chrono Trigger, if you don't give us 5 stars, I'm going to be mad at you.
Me too, to be honest.
Yeah, so there, 2 people will be mad at you. Guys, before we end, can I briefly make an announcement?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have enough podcasts, so I'm starting a new one.
Who would have thought?
Friends of the show, Luke Lewis and Joseph Hooper, who have been on this one a couple of times, we just started collaborating, and it came out really great every time we did. And so we said, hey, what if we did a show that was topical about big topics in games, about news in games, and do like new game reviews occasionally. So that's what we did. We launched a new show called Crossplay Conversations that's going to come out bi-weekly. It's live now. The first 2 episodes are available on all podcasting platforms. So if you aren't annoyed by the sound of my voice and you enjoy smart conversations about video games like this one, but more topical instead of book club format, check us out. Crossplay Conversations.
Can I just throw a little tiny endorsement there? Not that it matters much, but like, we all love Jacob. Like I don't need to pitch you on why you should listen to him. Yeah, he's all right. Exactly. We're all on the same page. He's at least all right. But Luke, I met like 4 months ago, and Luke was like the sweetest person in the world. And sorry, Jacob, but who cares? Subscribe for Luke.
Do it for Luke Lewis.
Do it for Luke Lewis. No, they're both lovely. I'll go listen to. I'll admit. I'll do it. Pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, the first 2 episodes. One is about the console oligopoly that we have currently.
Oh, dang.
And the other is about kind of our mid-year in review for video games that have come out in 2023. So,
if 2 heavy topics.
Yeah, 2 heavy topics, and we're going to keep the bangers coming. So cross-play conversations on all podcasting platforms. Y'all, you can find me at Jacob McCourt on all things, but really, go find cross-play conversations. Katie, where can you be found on the internet?
I am Lesperak on Twitter for the time being. LESPERAK. We'll see, but for now, I'm still there. I'm talking about...
Does she mean X?
We're not going to talk about that right now. It's not.
If you just don't update your app, it doesn't become X. It stays Twitter.
Mine is still a Bluebird, and I don't know. We'll see. But for now, that's where I'm at. I'm on Twitter.
Travis, where are you zeeting?
Oh, no.
Oh, gosh. I'm on that
Travis.
website app thing at Travis Colnut. But I think at this point, maybe I'll just hang out in the Discord.
Good. Flora, where are you zeeting?
Oh man, I hate everything. Welcome to the social internet. I guess I have a Zeet. I guess I have a Zeet of at Ludo Narrative FM if you want to come see my gaming stuff. I'm also on like Threads and Blue Sky and every other Twitter alternative now. So like,
haven't done it yet.
Just
I'm
type in
Mastodon.
Flora Marigold somewhere, and it's Marigold not spelled like the plant. It's M-E-R. Marigold, like the character from The Witcher, which is where I stole the last name from. That anywhere is fine. Come see me and come get me off the Musk app. That'd be great.
Are you on Hive?
I think I made one actually.
Yeah.
I actually think I have one. It's not an active use. I don't have it
Are
bookmarked.
you on Toot Zoot?
Bless you.
That one's fake. I made it up, but that's where you can find all these lovely people. I guess I'll end the show now and say shout out Mike Ruffalo, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
And Jacob McCord.
with many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Crossplay Conversations debuts on August 1st with brand new episodes hitting every other Tuesday. Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers
and happy gaming.